Hello and welcome to a guide on how to study like Hermione Granger from the Harry Potter series. My name is Michaela McGregor and I've done this kind of video once before when I made a how-to tutorial on how to study like Rory Gilmore, and I thought I would try it out with Hermione because years ago I used to be like obsessively just fixated on Harry Potter. I was Hermione for Halloween. I just kept all the books in my room so I could pick them up at any spot and start reading them. And even though I haven't reread them lately because I've just been busy with other things, I think that series will always just kind of stay with me because it was like my first book series that I really got into. So I really want to just kind of make a guide on how you can study more like Hermione. And this is drawing from her positive traits and also learning from her negative traits, which I'll put that at the very end. Using her as inspiration is a really good way to kind of find your footing when it comes to getting your own study routine or finding habits that work for you that make you feel like you want to do better and work harder. So starting with a planner. As we know, in Order of the Phoenix, Hermione buys Harry and Ron a planner and it just like spouts things at them which they don't appreciate. Like, once you've dotted your I's and crossed your T's, then you may do whatever you please. Don't leave it till later, you big second grader. And I think there's one more. What's interesting about this is Hermione like beams in approval or something at it. So we know she likes having a planner that kind of bosses you around. Unfortunately, magic planners are not currently on the market. But in lieu of that, first of all, write down motivation for yourself. Not necessarily write a commandment, like you don't have to insult yourself, but just kind of those affirmations that make you feel like you can achieve what you've set out for yourself to do during the day. We know that Hermione writes down all the things that she needs to do. She doesn't try to keep track of it off the top of her head. So if you want to kind of like adapt the methods Hermione uses, then maybe just start writing down in a planner all of the things that you need to do. I think that one of the more well-known quotes is from when she takes out this big book, is like, I checked this out weeks ago for a little bit of light reading, and that tells us Hermione reads for pleasure. She reads big, massive books for light reading, which, granted, I think that anyone's definition of light reading, that's not going to be light reading. I think that this is just meant to be humor, but checking out books from the library just for pleasure, that's something that Hermione does, and it's something you can easily do too in your free time. Don't let others take advantage of your hard work. This is something that can actually come up a lot. If you're consistently getting your homework done, others might try to exploit that and text you and say, hey, can you send me your answers for the homework? And Hermione almost always puts her foot down. There might be a couple of cases when she like is just worn down by Harry and Ron, but for the most part, she doesn't want them copying her homework. You've put in that time. Don't let others take advantage of the fact that you have gotten your work done and that you're organized with your work. I think it's just a good lesson to learn from her. But it's also equally important to help others and to help your friends. All the time throughout the books, we see Hermione helping Neville, Harry, and Ron because they just struggle more with the homework, and she takes the time out of her day to make sure they understand it and to help them get through the class. If she wanted to help them just to get good grades, she would let them cheat, but she wants them to learn. So if you really want to channel Hermione, you can definitely help others to learn, help them to understand the content and not just get an A+ on the content. Make sure that you prepare for your exams well in advance. Hermione starts way earlier than Harry and Ron always want to start studying. And not only that, but she also color codes and creates study schedules so that she's prepared for what content she needs to review. She even makes up study schedules for Harry and Ron at some point, which again, they are less than happy about. But I just think this is a really interesting way of seeing just how thorough and methodical she is in her planning process. That she color codes her study schedule. Like, she goes to all these lengths just to make sure that she is feeling very organized as she goes about studying. Get notebooks and folders that are certain colors that match like a certain class so that you can keep all your notes organized. Also get flashcards that are in multiple colors, and then you can even create a study schedule as well, so devoting certain hours of your day or maybe certain time in the library to studying particular topics. Take classes that you're actually interested in and expose yourself to points of view that you may not have experienced prior to taking that specific class. Because Hermione's Muggle-born, and to Ron's surprise, she takes Muggle studies. And he's like, why would you take a class if you already know all about Muggle-borns? And she says, well, it would be like interesting to learn about them from the magic side point of view. And I love this, even though it means in her third year that she has way too much on her plate and it actually like breaks her down mentally, which I will be talking about later in the video. It's still so interesting to me that she wanted to take this class purely for the sake of learning and gaining knowledge. And I think that that's kind of a characteristic that you can keep close to your heart when you're choosing your own classes, is what do you want to learn about? What do you want to know? What do you want to gain a new perspective in? On a similar note, in your free time, study the things that you don't know about. Hermione is so interested in knowing who Nicholas Flamel is, and she devotes a lot of her free time to studying to try to figure out who this man is. So pursue topics of interest. So this next one is from the end of Sorcerer's Stone in the book, and sadly this didn't make it to the movies, and I really think this scene should have been in the movies, but Hermione uses logic to get her and Harry out of the kind of like an escape room with a bunch of different potion bottles. It's not rote memorization. information. It's just pure logic. And she says something really interesting about how a lot of wizards would have been stuck in there if they don't have any use of logic. This is just something that's really important when you're struggling with a topic to understand in class, whether it's math or science or anything at all. Go beyond just trying to memorize what you need to know for your exam. If you truly comprehend the content that you're studying, you're more likely to just be inherently familiar with the topic. Of course, there are some cases you do just need to memorize. Like if you are taking a bio class and need to learn all the enzymes, you're going to have to memorize. But if you're able in some way to implement logic, then definitely by all means try to do that. Use your free time in between classes to study. 6th year, Hermione is like, we have free time, yes, but let's use that to study, much to Ron's dismay. But it's definitely a good tactic to use to get things done. That way you're less stressed in the evenings or the mornings if you're using that spare time during your day. This next one is while you're in class, make sure that you have the courage to communicate with your professors. There's a line that mentions Hermione has to ask the professors a couple of times to restate something or to clarify something that they said. And this is really interesting because a lot of people, myself included, it's scary to ask a professor a question, especially to ask the professor to repeat themselves. Seeing Hermione do this, she's just asking them to clarify. I mean, that's what the professors are there for. When you're in class, remember that Hermione feels confident enough to ask them to repeat themselves and know that like it's totally okay. You can definitely do that too, and it's just going to help you to learn, and the professor will probably be glad that you asked them to clarify. Remember to see the value in things that aren't necessarily studying. One thing that often stresses me out is when I'm doing things that aren't studying when I know I have studying to do. This happens in the 4th book. Hermione and Ron are helping Harry to prepare for one of the tasks in the Triwizard Tournament. They have to set aside time that they would have been studying to help him out. And Hermione says something like, well, it's okay because this is all stuff that I would like to learn anyway for Defense Against the Dark Arts. Obviously, sometimes you do need to not watch a movie and instead focus on homework. But just remember, when you are enjoying yourself or doing something that you want to do, that doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It's okay sometimes to put other things ahead of homework and to look at the thing that you're doing and say, what value does this have in my life? Find a hobby, a passion, or a cause to pursue. Hermione gets so involved with helping out the house elves at Hogwarts, knitting them things and like hiding them so they'd accidentally pick it up and they'd be free. And it just gives her something to do. She starts knitting all the time. Likewise, find something that you really care about, that you just find yourself wanting to do in your spare time. Another thing you can do to study more like Hermione is to start a study group. Study group is kind of a funny term for this because obviously Dumbledore's army in the 5th book is more than a study group, and it's really violating Umbridge's rules that she has for the school. But Hermione does it. She starts essentially a study group, and she bands together so many of the classmates that want to learn more hands-on experience Defense Against the Dark Arts. This level of initiative, leadership, just kind of taking the reins and not being afraid to do something like that is really inspiring. Things that allow you to connect with your classmates and to feel more prepared to take on the content that you need to be studying. During the summers and everything, you can also self-study. Hermione very clearly makes note of this when she steps into the train compartment in the very first book, and I mean, she already knows how to prepare Harry's classes. She's been reading Hogwarts, a history and everything. In your summer free time, prepare for your classes, and the year ahead, just get more familiar with content and advance yourself. Okay, and then finally, I want to go over some things that Hermione messes up with. She's a great fictional character, and what makes her so great is that she's very flawed. In the movies, she's not as flawed as she is in the books, and this is not to criticize the portrayal or anything, because I love the movies, but I just wish we'd seen a little bit more of her weaknesses. And the first one is when she encounters the boggart during the exams, and she bursts out absolutely terrified because the boggart, for her greatest fear was McGonagall giving her a bad grade on a certain class or something. And I think that this shows how debilitating her fear of bad grades is. I don't think that we should ever have that kind of fear of bad grades, and this might be hypocritical for me to say because I'm probably very scared of bad grades as well. But the point is, you should always strive for good grades, but don't allow it to become such a big fear that it's your greatest fear. Know your limits. This one, as I mentioned before, I was going to return to, in 3rd year, she takes so many classes that she needs a time turner, obviously, and she's literally in tears a lot of the time because she's so overwhelmed with her work. This is never the kind of load you want to take on, that you're in tears from your workload. So make sure that you understand how much time you have, what you can take on mentally and with the physical time that you have. Back to the grades thing, try not to let the bad grades get you down. Hermione's upset when she gets her OWLs back because there was one grade that was less than an O, less than an outstanding. She was really disappointed by this, and I think that it's just kind of important to remember to celebrate your accomplishments and to not feel down by something that's permanent. There's nothing she can do to change that grade, and ultimately everything turned out perfectly fine. I think that's just something that's really important to remind yourself. This was actually quoted in Daredevil last night, and I think in Daredevil it was quoting the Beatles, but everything is going to turn out okay in the end, and if it's not okay, then it's not the end. Just something good to kind of think about and keep in mind. And then finally, something we can learn is Hermione's interactions with divination. She does not like the class because it doesn't make sense to her. She feels like she's not doing well at it, and so she just says it's not worth her time and it's a stupid class, like it's meaningless. But don't give up if you're not necessarily good at something. It can still have value. And we definitely learn this when obviously the prophecy for Harry and Voldemort has so much influence over the rest of the series. And Hermione just kind of dismisses divination as not worth her time. I think it's definitely good to acknowledge what you're not good at. Like, definitely recognize the subjects that are your weaknesses. But to say altogether that it's just a waste of time and that it's not a subject worth learning, I think that that's kind of overstepping the boundaries. So with keeping all these things in mind, you can definitely study more like Hermione and also just learn from her in general, from her mistakes. Who doesn't want to get good grades like she does? So I hope that this is helpful, and I hope that it kind of inspires you to study a little bit more like Hermione. But thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a fantastic day.